Well, Sky News has revealed former state premier, MPs and other state officials, state premiers I should say, are exempt from the Albanese government's controversial super tax. Live now to our political editor Andrew Clennell. Talk us through this. It's not going to go down well.
Well, I saw you give Daniel Molino a bit of a net session earlier. It's a good, interesting start for him as he starts that new job. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But it's interesting when you see that person come into that sort of role, and he was sort of fumbling about a bit, but he kind of got there with some responses. We had Murray Watt, the Environment Minister, who's a bit more experienced on yesterday. He started to go to this argument, this super tax is about paying for things, right? That's why we need it for the budget. But when you think about it, they gave us the $5 to $10 income tax cuts. They're $7.5 billion a year. You could argue this is paying for some of that, $2.3 billion a year. And basically my investigations have uncovered that there are people exempt from this. Jim Chalmers was asked by us last Wednesday, people like Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton, who are on the old politicians' pension scheme, exempt. And he said, yes, they are, nothing to see here. Well, there's a lot of people who aren't. And they are, any state MP who's on the old pension scheme can be. Jacinta Allen, for example, is on the old pension scheme. Bob Carr certainly would be someone. Any former state judge, any former state head of a public service body, any former police commissioner. There are a lot of people who, because of constitutional arrangements, aren't going to cop this tax. Now, I've seen comment on social media, let's have a referendum. So they do have to cop the tax, Laura. This was Murray Watt talking it through yesterday.
We have received an endorsement from the Australian people to legislate in the manner that we put forward. The reality is we will be relying on that taxation revenue to help meet some of our other priorities, like lifting bulk billing rates for GP clinics and supporting people with cost of living. Of course, there is a small group of people, including the ones that you've identified today, who cannot be taxed on their superannuation under the Constitution. Now, we're, of course, not going to be introducing laws that are in breach of the Constitution and will be struck down.
Yeah, I didn't even get to James Molino talking about the people who would be exempt, i.e. politicians on the pension scheme, but there's enough in it, really, that this could really cause some problems if the coalition actually got their act together, right?
Yeah, well, there's an argument they could have prosecuted it more during the campaign. I think the government's relying on the fact that most people don't have a lot of sympathy for people with $3 million in their super fund. But as you pointed out to Molino, well, why not index it? Well, the simple reason is they wouldn't get enough money, but that's the unfairness of it. Just like there's super tax that comes in on people on $250,000 a year. You pay an extra 15% tax on your super. And the crazy thing about that is, though, that's not indexed. And when you look at the growth of wages and you look at the growth of housing costs, when you don't index these things, way down the track, they can become an issue for everybody, essentially, or will eventually. And also, as you pointed out, the unrealised gains. It just seems an unfair system. Your super balance goes up, get hit with a 20 grand tax bill. I don't know what happens, stock market or something, property market plunges, it comes down. You don't get the money back.
Yeah, and that's a fair question as well, I think. What happens to the tax treatment of unrealised losses? Now, look, as Daniel Molino pointed out, the carbon scheme, taxes unrealised gains. Sure, there's also an employee share scheme that does much of the same thing. That's not to say it's fair, though. And this is, you're talking about a superannuation system, which is people's money. It's meant to be there for retirement. It's an important part of our safety net system. And the whole point of super is that people don't rely on the pension.
Well, it's definitely a Robin Hood tax, as you were pointing out. And it seems to be a statement by the government, who also look to define what superannuation should be for in legislation. They think that people shouldn't have too much superannuation, it seems to me, which is kind of interesting, particularly when we have, Wayne Swan and Greg Combet chairing super boards. So at the end of the day, we're going to get to a stage in 10 years where everyone's going to need $3 million in their super fund to sort of survive through retirement. So it's all fine now.
Retire,
in a sense, it's all fine now, right? It's all understandable now, but then index it so it remains targeting the very rich. That's right. They won't.
Just on Murray Watt, he is the new Environment Minister, and he, on the weekend with you, was signalling a different approach to Tanya Plibersek. He's got a few decisions that are big ones that are pending at the moment that are controversial.
Yeah, well, he's saying, I'm going to make a decision on the North West Shelf expansion
When's
by
that?
May 31. So he's going to have been minister for 2.5 weeks. So I think we all know what fixes in there, which is fine. But, it's just so cynically obvious it was delayed past the election to get to not harm Green votes to say yes to this project, and that's my suspicion. It just seems like he's going to take a browner approach, if you like, to the environment here. They're conscious of the votes in WA and the salmon farming votes in Tasmania, and this is what perked up my interest. I've never heard an environment minister before, Laura, say in like the first sentence, one of the first things I'm going to do is meet the miners. And that was intriguing to me. Normally they're like advocates in the cabinet, right? The resources minister meets the miners. The environment minister, of course consults, but basically looks to environment groups to form policy. That's very much not the case here. And he's there to keep those WA votes flowing, I think. Here's Murray Watt.
In terms of the reforms, as I say, I've really just started beginning consultations on that, and you will have seen I'll be travelling to Perth this week to meet with representatives of the WA government, including Premier Cook, mining, environmental representatives, business representatives as well. I'm not locking myself in at this point to an exact model of an EPA, but I'll be very interested to hear the range of views that are being put forward.
Yeah, perhaps a bit of virtue signalling there from Murray Watt as to what type of environment minister. And look, from what I understand of some of these environment groups and their advocacy and how they really hammer the environment minister, whoever is in charge at the time, I mean, they're not going to be happy with that. Murray Watt might get off on the wrong foot with
I think it's going to be an interesting watch, actually. But Albanese clearly sees him as a fixer, so in one of his close allies, so he's going to be tested. And obviously what that means is he's not going to have a minister, fighting him all the time like Tanya Plibersek was. He's going to be doing what the PM wants. I mean,
remember the Coalition had energy and environment minister? That wasn't a happy marriage either. That was really difficult to do. But look, there's really important decisions to be made there. North West Shelf, Beetaloo Basin, Narrabri is still being held up as well. And this is critical to the cost of gas, electricity, and all these things flow on. So that's why the Environment Minister is so critical. Anyway, you don't need to know that. Let's talk about Ted O'Brien because as Deputy, he has the right to choose his portfolio. Yeah. Everyone assumes he's choosing Treasury, but you don't think he will?
I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious because of his answer yesterday. I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, and his answer during that press conference last week, where he never sort of committed to it. And I just wonder if in winning that ballot by 4 votes, Susan Lee's promised it to someone else. It does have that feel about it. Now, one person we know will be senior in the shadow cabinet, and we wonder if they'll come to a coalition agreement. I suspect they finally will, but is Alex Hawke, who would have been a numbers person for her, no matter what he was saying, and we were laughing about it last Tuesday.
He hadn't
thought about who he was going to vote for.
That's right.
So he could either be shadow defence, which has obviously been Andrew Hastie's role, or could he be shadow treasurer? Could someone like him or Tim Wilson, or could we get a left field shadow treasurer? Because why won't Ted O'Brien and Susan Lee just say, look, Ted's going to be shadow treasurer? He was the Deputy Liberal leader yesterday. Traditionally, you get to choose your portfolio. Will you be taking on the shadow treasury role, do you think?
Those conversations continue to be had, Andrew. We haven't finalised them, and until they are finalised, I won't be preempting any
has she promised it to someone else? Has she promised that job to someone else?
Whether it be for myself or for anybody else. In due course, Andrew, all of that will be made very clear.
Ted,
it's early days. We've had initial conversations.
Let me ask you very, very bluntly, and it's sort of a yes or no question. Has Susan Lee promised the shadow treasurer job to someone other than yourself?
I understand your wish for a yes or no answer to any question, Andrew, and I respect that. I really do. But again, my answer doesn't change. We are having these discussions at the moment.
Yeah, you get an instinct about these things, don't you, Andrew, when you're looking for answers and interviewing these politicians all the time. They don't give it to you straight. As soon as they give you a weird answer, you're like, oh, hang on, there's something going on there.
I think there is. It certainly
seems like it, yeah. And the coalition agreement, I mean, they can take their time with all of this as well, right? But
yeah,
I mean, they keep on publicly talking about net zero. There's some within the Libs and, of course, some within the Nats that want to dump it all together. I just don't think there's any much political value in doing that, especially when you look back at the areas that they want to. And also, I mean, show me a country that's on track to meet the 2030 target anyway.
Yeah, and we're going to have a 2035 target soon too. It's like one of those things like the North West Shelf the government's put off. There are just some Nats who are so keen on it though. That makes me think like they've either got to commit, the Libs have either got to commit to nuclear, maybe lifting the moratorium, and then the Nats will come on board at net zero, or they have to dump it, or they could say we're going to review it. I think the job for Susan Lee, in a sense, Laura, is to take policy out of the negotiations. The way out for her is to say to David Littleproud, look, we're not having policy in the coalition agreement or on these sort of matters, or you got no agreement. And what's he going to do? Give up all the perks of staff and the shadow ministries? That will be the bluff call. That would be kind of the smart thing to do, because you don't want to be seen to have the tail wagging the dog once again. And there was a feeling with nuclear and a few other policies that happened last term, and we saw how it ended up. So I think all that's really interesting going forward, and they're still massively divided over that and have some issues. The only way out's probably we still support nuclear, but we'll let the market decide.
Yeah, and go back to what is, a central tenet of a Liberal National Party value, and that is letting the market decide in many ways. But I do think this argument, I wonder whether you agree with me here. Okay, they keep on talking about dropping net zero. That's an argument that's been prosecuted at other elections. They're re-bringing it up. It hurts them in the cities. But what's the point? Doesn't it kind of undercut their whole argument for nuclear, the need for nuclear, if they're not signed up to Paris?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all a valid argument.
I mean, they've got to...
otherwise, they could just say coal forever, I guess.
That's right.
I mean...
That's right.
Well, they put it this way. They need something in its place. If they're not going to commit to net zero, they say, well, this is our target by 2040, and then we'll see what happens with technology. Because, as we spoke about last week, until the technology gets better, we're not headed for net zero anyway.
And it could get there. I mean, the whole world is looking at how they facilitate the energy needs of AI. And here we are talking, we don't even have reliable or cheap energy. The rest of the world is talking about the need to have enough energy to fuel AI, which is just ahead in leaps and bounds. But anyway, I'm getting off track, aren't I? Okay, what's happened this week? Anything? Or is it just kind of this lull period where everyone's getting...
Well, Anthony Albanese returns via, I think he's got... another visit in Asia on the way home, and obviously the rate cut dominates this week. And the other thing, of course, is that landing that coalition agreement in the shadow ministry. When you say they have a lot of time, that's true, because until Corwell's called, which is a very difficult count with the preferences, Parliament can't sit. Therefore, Anthony Albanese won't be having Parliament, as I understand it, before his G7 trip to Canada. So we're looking at Parliament maybe not until mid to late July after the school holidays.
Okay. And are we still keeping an eye on, I haven't checked in with Tom Connell, but Goldstein is pretty close. Bradfield, that's going to be a recount likely.
I think so. They got the final batch of postal votes Friday in both seats, in all seats, in fact, and they haven't been counted. So Bradfield's closer. It's like 43, right? I think Goldstein's 206, so Tim Wilson might just hang on. But Bradfield, I mean, if a batch went the wrong place or something, could turn it around. It doesn't get any closer than that, does it?
No, it doesn't. Well, I think one of those North Queensland seats was like, Herbert was like 17 votes 1 year. So,
gosh. 9 people changed their vote.
Yeah, someone correct me, but I think it was that. Anyway, we need Tom Connell for that. Hey, great to see you.
Yeah, cheers.